The tray slipped from her hands and the glass shattered across the restaurant floor. Before Maya could even apologize, her manager was already shouting, "You're done. Get out of my sight." She stood frozen, her face pale as customers turned to stare. "I'll pay for the glass," she said quietly, but the manager snapped, "You've cost me more than glass, you've cost me time." The words hit harder than the fall. She untied her apron, placed it on the counter, and walked out into the cold air, wondering how a single mistake could erase 3 years of hard work. That night she sat in her small apartment, counting her last bills when an email popped up from an unknown address. It was from a corporate recruiter offering an interview for an assistant position at Grant Industries. She had never heard of the company, but desperation pushed her forward. The next morning she arrived at the glass tower, nervous but composed. Inside the office, everything gleamed white and gold. The receptionist handed her a form and whispered, "You must be special, he doesn't interview anyone himself." Maya frowned who the CEO, Ethan Grant. When she entered his office, she stopped cold. He was the same man who had been dining at the restaurant the day she was fired, the one whose drink she had accidentally spilled on his suit. He looked up with a smirk and said, "I see you remember me, Miss Maya. I never forget a face, especially one that ruined my favorite tie." Her heart pounded as she whispered, "You're the owner." He leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting. "Maybe fate brought you here, or maybe it's just giving me the perfect chance to return the favor. Welcome to Grant Industries." He said, his voice smooth but sharp like a blade she couldn't yet see coming. The following week, Maya started her new job inside the skyscraper that touched the clouds. Every morning she passed through glass doors polished so bright she could see her own nervous reflection. Ethan greeted her with that same smile, one that hid something she couldn't yet read. He assigned her long hours, impossible schedules, and endless files. The other assistants whispered that no one lasted under him, but Maya refused to quit. She needed the paycheck, and she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of watching her fail. He would call her into his office for the smallest mistake, sometimes just to watch her struggle. She noticed how he tested her patience, asking for impossible tasks with no instructions. Then one evening, as she was organizing reports, she overheard 2 executives whispering about Ethan's failed deal from last year, how he lost millions because of arrogance. It hit her. Then this wasn't about revenge for spilled coffee. It was about pride. She reminded him of his failure, of someone who didn't bow to him. The next morning he called her in again, handing her a folder labeled "Confidential." "I need this presentation ready for the board tomorrow." She opened it and froze inside. Were files about layoffs, hundreds of workers. "It's at risk." She looked at him shocked. "You're firing all of them." He didn't answer, just said, "Prove you can handle the truth." She spent the night reading every document and found numbers that didn't add up. There was something hidden in the accounts, something Ethan wasn't supposed to show anyone. When she walked into his office the next day, she placed the file on his desk and said, "You asked me to handle the truth, so here it is. Your finance director is stealing from the company Ethan's." Pen stopped midair, his face losing color. "How did you find that?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Because unlike you, I pay attention to people, not power." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing, his usual calm replaced by disbelief. He stood, walked to the window and stared down at the city like he was seeing it for the first time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard. "You're saying my most trusted man has been taking money from under me?" She nodded. "I checked the invoices and traced the fake accounts. They all lead to him." Ethan turned back toward her, his expression unreadable. "I hired you to make your life miserable, not to save my company." Maya didn't flinch. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because hundreds of people were about to lose their jobs for something that wasn't their fault." He stared at her, and for the first time in weeks, there was no pride in his eyes, only shame. He pressed a button on his desk and called security, asking them to bring in the finance director. Within an hour, the truth was out, the man confessed, and Ethan watched in silence as the officers led him away. The board demanded an emergency meeting, and by the time it ended, the company was saved. That night, Ethan found Maya still working at her desk, organizing what was left of the reports. He said quietly, "You just saved everything I built and embarrassed me at the same time." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you needed both." He let out a breath, almost like a laugh. Hans said, "I think I owe you an apology." She looked up, meeting his gaze, and replied, "An apology won't be enough next time. Try respect." Ethan nodded slowly, then said, "How about a promotion instead?" She froze, unsure if he was serious, but his tone carried no sarcasm. "Welcome to your new position. Miss Meyer, executive assistant to the CEO, and the only person I'll actually listen to." Weeks passed and everything inside Grant Industries began to shift. Employees whispered about the new assistant who wasn't afraid to challenge the boss. Ethan was still strict but different, somehow quieter, more focused. The arrogance that once filled the office had turned into something closer to admiration whenever he looked at Meyer. She worked beside him, during meetings offering advice that others were too scared to give, and every time she spoke, he listened. One morning the board gathered for a quarterly review. Ethan began his speech, but halfway through he turned to Meyer and said, "Why don't you explain this part?" She hesitated, then stood and spoke with confidence, showing how she had reorganized the company's workflow to save money without cutting jobs. The room erupted in applause when she finished, and Ethan smiled with pride, saying, "To the board, she's the reason this company stands today." When the meeting ended, he followed her to her desk and said, "You've changed everything here. You even changed me." She met his eyes calmly and said, "I didn't come here to change you. I came here to survive." He smiled faintly. "Maybe survival is what taught you leadership." Meyer looked down, trying to hide the small smile forming on her lips, but he noticed. He said softly, "You were right that day at the restaurant. People matter more than power," she replied. "Maybe now you understand power isn't in how loud you speak, it's in how you listen." That evening, Ethan handed her an envelope marked confidential. She opened it and saw her name beside a title, Chief Operations Officer. She looked up in shock. "You're serious?" He nodded. "You turned revenge into redemption. I think that deserves a future together as equals." She smiled for the first time without fear and said, "Then let's build something worth respecting. If this story made you smile, share it with someone who needs a reminder that accidents can turn into beautiful beginnings."